Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. Today's episode is with Nikki Adamson, and I have been looking forward to this for a very long time because you're just a very cool person to begin with. And then also you are senior recruiter at Hire People, where you specialize in early stage startup hiring, which is such an interesting niche specifically for go-to-market teams. And you're also writing a book on the topic. So we have a lot to discuss today. But I'd love to start by giving you the floor for a second here and just telling us a little bit about your background and what you're working on right now.
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. So much of my background, I realize, comes down to teams. Like, I love playing. I played sports my whole life. I love being a fan of teams. And then startups were like the natural progression once you stopped. My college basketball days were over. Played club sports, but it was also great to be on startups. And that's just kind of like where I got hooked on us all moving together towards this big goal. And in thinking about how do we build teams, and hiring has just been this great part of that. So I've been on startup teams, started a recruiting firm to do that myself, ended up kind of folding that into Hire People, which has been amazing. And it's given me time to not run a business and also at the same time continually work with all these amazing startup founders, who are trusting us with their like hopes and dreams. And the people side that's what our business is, right? That's our differentiator. So that's been so exciting. And yeah, it's been giving me some extra headspace to think about how do I take all of these stories and all of these learnings over this past almost decade of doing this work and put that into a book. So yeah, that's what I'm excited to be writing right now. Working title is Why We Fail at Hiring and How to Succeed. Really leaning into that empathy of like, we all make mishires. This is not because we're not trying hard enough. It's not because we don't want it enough. It's not because we're intentionally not building out the right scoping for our roles. It's because it's really hard. And there's a lot of reasons that we can unpack into why it's hard, but it's also visceral, especially in this early startup space. So I've been having a lot of fun really leaning into that and kind of unpacking the more of like, how did we get to this being so hard? And then what are like the core big moves that we can make before we even get into tactics to actually make it so we have a path to success there?
It is very difficult, specifically for startups. I feel like hiring is just like a whole other world than for a big corporation. So very excited to get into that. You said you got hooked on startups, which I feel like startups are like either you love them or you hate them for people. So what about, I guess, like the startup world do you love so much?
Yeah, I mean, the pacing is pretty basic, right? Like everyone is running really fast. I think that's so critical. I'm a person who, every team I've been on, for better or for worse, I'm the most improved, right? I'm always trying to learn and gain at that. And that's always like a fun journey for me. Like I want to be learning. If I'm not learning, kind of like stagnant, and that's not as exciting for me. There are periods where I'm okay with not being on that fast treadmill. So I think just being on a team where everyone's all in. We hear that from startup founders all the time. Like we want someone who's going to lean in. And I spend a lot of my time unpacking what does that actually look like? What are the signals we look for in an interview to actually figure out, is that person able to lean in? Do they like leaning in? So for me, it's just working on this hard thing together, like a sports team, right? When you're out shooting extra shots, running extra sprints, like trying to get better for that team, like that environment really energizes me. I will also say just like the nimble dexterity. I worked in a large nonprofit before jumping into startups. And, I was printing something on physical paper almost every day. I would recommend changes that seemed pretty natural to me and kind of was pushed back, saw feedback like, well, we're doing fine and this is how we've always done it. Why would we make a change? And then in the startup space, it's like the exact opposite, right? Everyone's voice is really valued and we're running really fast. The first startup I joined, I didn't know we had a printer until like 7 months in. So like some tangible things changed for me. But yeah, I just realized like these are my people. The people who care inordinately about doing an extraordinary thing are the people that I want to spend most of my time with.
This podcast is brought to you by Evelyn Cools Marketing. If you're an early stage B2B tech founder who wants marketing to actually work, you're in the right place. As a fractional head of marketing and growth advisor, I help early stage B2B startups take marketing from 0 to 1 by building the foundations, testing different channels, and scaling what works. I'm currently offering a free strategy call where I do an audit of what you've tried with marketing so far and share practical advice that I believe will make the biggest impact on your growth engine. Visit evelyncools.com to book your free strategy call today. Now back to the episode. I don't think any of the startups I've joined have had printers.
I had to go next door, or I like had to go next door for the fax machine. Got to use the printer when I was printing my cheap Spirit boarding pass, so it worked out.
That's so funny. Well, being all in, definitely you cannot be a passive person or someone who's not gonna like have autonomy over your work or kind of like push forward on your own even when it's hard. So that is a very specific type of person and I very much relate to that. Moving fast, all like great things, but can also be a lot to handle. So one of the things that I love to ask every guest at the beginning of the episode is, what's a wellness practice or something that you do to kind of stay sane within this crazy startup world?
Yeah, moving my body is always a big part of that. And being in water, I would say, ends up being pretty critical, I find, whether that's a hot tub or swimming. We were in Spain for New Year's and I got to swim in the Mediterranean on December 30th, which is very chilly, very cold, but also like one of the highlights of my trip. So being in water and then bookstores, always falling into books. So writing feels like a natural path for me based on the amount of reading that I do.
Love a good bookstore. No one has talked about that on the podcast, but I also instantly calm down when I'm walking through a bookstore.
There's bookstores in town that know that like if I'm having a bad day, I'll just go there. And I'm in Portland, so like we have a great book culture. And they know that like I'm just having a bad day and they just need to like let me be. I don't need help. I just like need to physically stand in the bookstore and I'll be fine.
It's amazing. Well, that's a reason for, little mom and pop bookstores to still stay around is we need you, us crazy startup people.
Exactly. Libraries also great.
Agreed. Well, amazing. I love both of those things. The first topic that I'd love to talk with you about is really taking it back to like the beginning of hiring for a startup, when founders are first figuring out, who's going to be on our go-to-market team, who do I hire for first, when is the right time to hire. So I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of an idea how you approach that and when you feel like the right time is to even start thinking about hiring externally.
Yeah, really good question, Evelyn. And I think you and I have both seen this play out in a lot of different ways. And I think unfortunately, the answer is it depends. And a lot of it has to do with what's already on your team. What is your go-to-market motion, right? A product like growth motion is going to need different support than a B2B enterprise SaaS product. Also depends on what are the core skill sets of your current team, right? If you're a really technical leaning team and the thought of talking to customers is like, that's what's keeping you up at night, the fact that you have to meet a new stranger every day, you're going to have very different needs than if your natural sales folks who made your raises pretty quickly and like that part flows a little bit differently. So I think when we think about go to market, we have kind of our marketing function, which obviously you have a lot of expertise in. We have our sales function, and then we kind of have our customer management, engagement, like retention, upsell, CSM side of it. So on the marketing side, I think a lot of it depends on what education is needed in your market, right? Are you creating a category, which we all say we want to create categories, but that is a huge lift, right? So
don't get me started.
Create a category. We need to start immediately on the marketing front and really having someone dedicated there. If we're looking at, just getting the name out in an established category, now we're thinking through a slightly different conversation. But I think one piece that I really hope that founders start to learn more is that marketing is almost every time I work on a marketing role, it is the function least understood by most leaders. I love Emily Kramer and the work that she's been doing, and she has created a lot of content around kind of this notion that just says, most of our job at an early stage startup as a marketer is teaching our founders what the marketing function is, how it can help, and what to expect out of this. Something else that I think is critical about marketing is often has the ability to be your scientific lever. This is the data people. These are the people who are, being really creative, but these are scientists who have a finger on the pulse of everything. They can A/B test constantly. And that, I think we forget, can also tie into product. That can tie into positioning. That can tie into so many things. So I do find that marketing is often something that teams hire probably later than they, in hindsight, wish they had. It never hurts to have someone who's constantly thinking about how do we position, how do we help structure what our presence looks like as an executive team. How are we thinking about those things? Because so many of the seeds you plant in marketing bear fruit later, that I find this is one that we often should probably hire before we do. So I would say sooner than you think is my like marketing answer there. Anything to add on the marketing front?
I like how you framed that. And the idea that popped into my mind is I feel like marketing kind of forces you to, it's almost like company therapy, I feel like, because it like forces you to answer a lot of really difficult questions and get really clear on, we have to be able to put this in simple terms. Like, we need a one liner that captures our entire business. That's not an easy thing to do. So I feel like what you're saying too is like hiring sooner rather than later, and also just having someone who actually is going to push for this kind of clarity is just good from like a all-around company perspective.
Yeah, and I think we think that once we have product market fit, we're going to double down and really now we know our niche audience. That's a different type of marketing. That's a different marketer who's going to double down on the people we know. We want someone who really knows that audience. But I am also finding that someone who can wear that marketing hat is also going to help us test resonance and product market fit and which industries are we going to find that in. So it's a big investment though, right? And often you're not just hiring a marketer, you need some budget to go beyond that to help them run these tests. So it's definitely a little bit of a trade-off. But I'll say that to group a little bit of sales and marketing, at the end of the day, we want to learn information, right? We're trying to get data points. We need to set our pricing. Well, we need to have a lot of reps talking to customers to really get a sense of what does that pricing need to look like. So whether that's a salesperson who can wear the marketing hat and really gather data, or a marketing person who can wear that sales hat, you kind of want someone who's in that space. And sometimes that's your founding salesperson, right? I do find often that there's a lot of success in being founder-led sales. Again, if you're a founder who gets energized by selling. I think from a founder, if that is the biggest drain for your energy, it's probably not the best place for you to be putting your time. So I'll give that caveat, but a founder who's excited and energized by selling and talking to customers and getting that direct line of feedback, the longer you can build that motion out, the better. We're seeing that today's startups are raising, a seed round with some product market fit. You're raising with like a really good path to it. You're raising your A with pretty strong product market fit right now. So the longer we can learn and stay lean and do that, I'm finding great success. So to answer your question, Evelyn, about when, it's like when you can't take any more demos, when you can't nurture the leads in the way that you think, is often a great time to bring in help. And I want to be really clear. I hear this from people all the time. They want to bring in a VP of sales first. That's a mistake I see often. Really need that scrappy person who's going to kind of replicate what the CEO is doing, right? Bring that energy and that hustle and really look at, how do I take on the pipeline that you can't manage? How do we do this together as like a way of onboarding, but really starting pretty quickly to start owning their own accounts and going after things in market? You need a doer there. A really strong, really savvy doer is that first hire, in my opinion. And then post-sale, we don't wait till you have churn to get to that moment, but we also learn a ton by having an all hands on deck approach. That's a conversation that I hear a lot, but a little bit of it has to do with like, what's the likelihood that someone's going to churn? Well, do we have the time for someone to proactively go after that? And if not, it's probably time to get someone thinking and wearing that hat a little bigger. And that might be an internal person to start, but definitely need to think about that post-sale hire too.
Yep. When do you start feeling the pain on all these fronts? And when do you become the bottleneck? I feel like that's a good indicator.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what it means is that the more pain is coming, because now you're the bottleneck and now you also have to hire, which takes a lot of focus and a lot of time and a lot of energy. So it gets worse before it gets better, which is where we see, it's challenging. It's just hard to make these hires when you're at your most stretched and you're deep in the work. So I spend a lot of my time kind of helping zoom out, figuring, okay, beyond the tactics, what do we actually want this person to bring that maybe you as the founder are not bringing because it's not your specific niche function?
Yep. You said earlier, marketing is one of the least understood roles. So I want to kind of go back to that and maybe first off, like, why do you think that is? And then secondly, how do you hire for this role if you don't have that marketing background? Like, what should founders be looking for?
So good. A lot of different answers here, but I would say that oftentimes there ends up, if you make a hire on the marketing side, 6-8 months later, there ends up being a lot of disconnect. And I would say the biggest part there is in terms of what was a realistic set of expectations and goals. Evelyn, I'm sure you've seen this. You can't come into a role and expect to have this thriving pipeline of MQLs on day 6 in a way that on a sales side, you can at least see different activity, right? You have a sense of what that looks like. And I think that marketing, I mean, we've all been marketed too. My 8-year-old daughter, when an ad comes on, she's like, oh, they're just trying to sell pizza. Like, she recognizes when she's being sold to and what that looks like. We've all experienced marketing, and turns out during most games, she doesn't then ask for pizza, even though she knows it's happening, right? But on the other side, I think we don't always understand all of the levers and systems and tenacity and iteration and consistent strategic, iteration that it takes to get to that right person at the right time, knowing we're going to have that ROI in the testing. So I think it's almost like a black box that I think a lot of folks don't understand. And I find that you want a marketer who's going to be able to educate the team on possibility and help everyone realize, we are the finger on the pulse of the market. We can help you test more than just getting SQLs through the pipeline. But at the same time, if you bring someone in and they have to spend most of their time just educating the team on the function, then they're not spending their time doing the function. And I talk to a lot of marketers. I work a lot of founding marketer roles. And we can talk a little bit about that. This is a very tricky role, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. But something I hear a lot from candidates is realism. Does this leadership team understand what they want? Do they know the goals? If there's a commission component, what is that based on? Do we know what that looks like? And it's okay if the answer is no, but then are they open to that being a dialogue, right? Are they bringing in an expert they're going to trust? Or are they bringing in an expert that kind of from the get-go, they have a very specific set of goals and it's pretty clear they're unrealistic? So that's something that I hear fairly often.
Let's talk about that founding marketer since you brought it up. And I feel like this is a place where there are a lot of mishires, and I have my own thoughts on why that happens, but I'd love to hear from you. Who do you think is a great fit for being a founding marketer? What should people, founders look for in that? And why do you feel like there's quite a few mishires? I've joined companies where they've had 2 marketers already that only lasted a couple months, and I come in and I am the right profile for this early stage type of role, but it can be really hard as a founder to know who to bring in.
There's so many pieces here. I think one, you said it's a common mishire. I will say it's also a common restart. We see often folks come to us as kind of startup hiring experts, and we say great, have you already worked on this role? And they're like, oh yeah, we've already been working on it for 6 months. But we started with this focus, and then it was this focus, and then it was this focus. It's one that I find we're always going to learn during a process, but I would say this is the one that shifts the most. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with, it's just a function that often we don't know. I don't know that many teams who bring on a CMO as part of their founding crew, right? We're normally thinking CEO, CTO, COO. So it's a function that we need to hire for, but also it's just less known to us. So subject matter experts, I would say, are number one, where you want to go here. You want to talk to some really strong product marketers, some really strong demand gen marketers, kind of understand your audience, and someone who understands your buyer, right? Is this a low volume TAM, very targeted enterprise, account-based marketing? We really need to understand how this buyer thinks. Because there's only 300 buyers that exist? Or is this a really broad set where we're testing things and have a lot of different data points? There's so many different paths. So I think that's number one, is really educating ourselves with some subject matter expert discussions. Often our venture partners are more than happy to connect us with those folks. So I would say that's definitely the first step to kind of building that understanding and knowledge on a team. I think the other is just understanding, what are the goals? What do we need? I would say, generalists, we all love the T-shape, right? The you can do it all, but you have a spike. And what is that spike in? I would say as a market, I'm specifically talking B2B SaaS, often oscillates between, is that person demand gen or product oriented? I think that demand gen is a good way to think of it is we need more at bats. Mike Philippi gave me a really good analysis here once. He's like, yeah, if you need more at bats, you need demand gen, you need more demos. If we need better at bats, better quality, a better batting average, so our demos are converting, now we need a product marketer. Someone who's actually gonna help us understand, how do we resonate that messaging through? But if we need someone who's gonna go bring demos onto the calendar, that's a little bit more of the demand gen, and they tend to work really well together. Obviously, you know this, the in and outs of this, but we're seeing a shift actually lately. Katie, my boss, and I were talking about this yesterday, that we're seeing a lot more focus on this product marketer, someone who's really going to own literally taking a product to market and kind of have a better sense of how do we make sure that our messaging is resonating in all of these different capacities across the board. But when we're hiring for someone on the product side, we're hiring for a very different function. And how do we goal that? What are the metrics, right? They're a little bit different than did they bring in leads. So that's something that I see happens, is a challenge I see as well, is hiring a product marketer and then getting frustrated because they didn't bring in leads, right? There's a few different ways where it's like, okay, we need to figure out what we need, but then we also need to figure out what that person that we need is going to deliver.
Absolutely. And I actually very much am seeing the same thing with product marketers. I think honestly, in this age of like AI content, and also the fact that like it seems like every SaaS company is now positioning themselves as an AI tool, which they all need to include AI at this point, I feel like, but also that shouldn't be your differentiator. And, you know, there's a lot more people hiring for like storytelling roles, which is something new that I've just started seeing, and really figuring out like who are the best copywriters and product marketers that can tell the story. So this is very much in line also with what I think where I think we're going with like great marketers.
It's very noisy, and the best tools will start rising to the top on their own, but telling that story in a really way that resonates is standing out. And this will continue to ebb and flow over time as market conditions change, as buyer behavior changes. But I think that people buy things. At the end of the day, there has to be that human resonant component. And the product, I think product marketing as a function does such a good job at figuring out what is the like human psychology behind what people need to understand about our product. Not this is an AI note taker, but now you actually get to spend your time engaging and knowing that your to-dos are just, of course, going to make it onto your calendar from the call. It's not that you needed an AI note taker, right? That's the difference that a product marketing team is going to bring you, is like figuring out, okay, how do we actually differentiate in this space? And I think, as you mentioned, especially when things are getting crowded and there's a lot of buzzwords right now, I think it's pretty clear what that looks like. I mean, the 8-year-olds I hang out with, they can spot AI a mile away.
I know, it's crazy. I do feel like it's gonna keep getting better and better. I am so curious how this keeps evolving, but I do think the need for really great storytellers and copywriters and people who truly understand the psychology of your ICP are always going to be valuable, and probably more than ever.
It helps the lean startup too, because now you're bringing on that person who's going to be able to do that differentiation. But now with so much AI tooling, that person is able to actually be a team themselves. Doesn't mean over time we're not hiring as well, but we're able to kind of like really capture that resonance and make sure that it actually translates into executed work, because now they're wielding AI tools. That's a term that I kind of keep coming back to with clients I'm working with right now, and the differentiator between someone who's like, oh yeah, I like them, or I'm interested in this, or like, no, but is it your intern that you're wielding now to make it so that a lot of the easy repetitive work is done, but you're still making sure you apply that like very strategic stamp that you've, spent 20 years of your career building towards.
Wielding is such a great word. I feel like a warrior if I think about that word, which we need to be.
And it should feel powerful. It should feel powerful that we have all these tools at our disposal, and that we're going to keep testing them. And some of them might work for me, but not for you, Evelyn, and vice versa. But how are we? And that's where I think I really keep sitting back on wielding. Like, how are we using this for us? Some of the best content folks that I speak to, have told me like, wait, I started using AI and I got worse because I was trying to just focus on using AI tooling. Stepped back, thought, wait a second, how do I actually use this like I would use any other tool? Like, I'm the content person. And then we're like, oh, this is a tool I'm wielding. Okay, now I can reframe. And now we're seeing like incredibly accelerated output.
Is this a chapter in your book?
We'll see. I will say that where I want to get to, I think that's important, is how do we define who's the person who's going to wield a tool versus be skeptical of it, versus maybe test it out but not really lean in, versus, hey, this is how I've always done it, I'm not going to change, right? How do we get that person who seeks to wield is the person we want on our team, but how do we define what that is a lot of what I spend my time thinking about. And that's what we're going to get into in this book, is how do we actually think about core values for the business? How does that relate to the soft skills of how we want someone to show up, how we want someone to problem solve, be proactive, be an owner, be gritty, like all those kind of table stakes for startups? But then what's our flavor on that as a company? So often, for instance, I've worked multiple product marketing roles at the same time with the same stage of company, and it's pretty rare that I would submit one candidate to more than one role. It becomes pretty clear that there's alignment for them with one or none of those opportunities, but not all three. So what is that flavor, and how do we actually put words to it? And then how do we put metric to it? Those are the things that get us out of our own way and help us actually like really define it. But it also takes a minute. We talked about this a little bit, Evelyn, of like, we have to like pump on the brake a little bit and press pause. And I think that's like, honestly, saying that makes me anxious because I just want to go so fast and there's so much to do. But we also have to carve out the space to really think strategically, because a function like sales, a function like marketing, a function like recruiting, that's very effort driven. You're going to have a lot of one-on-one conversations. You're really going to have to go chase people down, invite them into conversation. If we know we're going to have to put in a lot of effort, that pumping the brakes might only be an hour, right? It might just be an hour to really align on what are the terms and values and things we really need and how are we defining them. Because if I interview someone and I think they check the box of, let's say, like problem solving, but my vision of problem solving is different than yours, Evelyn, and then they interview with you and you're like, this isn't a good problem solver. Well, we're already misaligned and no one is going to succeed here because we're actually looking for different outcomes. So I find that there's so much value in really defining the soft skills, even more than the hard skills, because the hard skills are going to change. No startup job description stays the same. The only thing we actually know is that there's going to be change.
I love this so much because I do feel like the startups that I've joined that I can have the biggest impact at, you're right, it changes day to day almost, like what we're focusing on, and that's fine. But if I'm not aligned with the culture, the leadership style, the like way that we work together, all of that, like that's really what's the most important. So I think it's really interesting that you said, you might think on paper all these, 3 candidates would work for these 3 companies, but you've done that like background research and you've had those conversations to really figure out like, is this person gonna fit longer term, not just here are like the few skills that they're bringing to the table right now.
Yeah, and I really like the Venn diagram as an example. So I think a lot about what is the potential circle for the role. We can't know the future, but let's really sink in here as a company. And this requires a lot of trust between an early team and me as a recruiting hiring partner, but also it's a good exercise because often we haven't thought through, because Evelyn, we mentioned we're hiring because we're in pain, because we're doing the job ourselves, but we haven't necessarily had that strategic lens because it's not our function or niche. So now we're going to bring someone in, but instead of just replicating that like tactics-based role, we actually want someone who's going to evolve the function. That's the goal, right? We want them to level this function up, which is why we're hiring. So taking that pause to think back of like, oh, what are the goals here? The earlier we can do that, the better we're going to then go find someone. But I'm always thinking, what is the circle in the Venn diagram for what this role might evolve into? And then when I talk to candidates and we continue to interview candidates, we're thinking, what is their circle? What do they want? What are they excited about? What are they actually like energized by and going to double down on? And then our goal here is to build as much overlap as possible so that depending on many different types of future outcomes, 80% of the future outcomes, there's going to be alignment for a longer term fit. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about that as well, but it does take a pause and it does take us really reflecting back and thinking. And it's very like if you give a mouse a cookie, right? Classic book and story of one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And so often when we're hiring, it forces us to unpack, what is our compensation philosophy? Okay, where do we want to be in the market? What are our goals for revenue numbers? There's so many different steps that we need to think about to make a big hire. And when hiring is what 70% of our budgets go towards is human salaries, I really do think it's worth it. And that's a big thing I'm tackling in this book is prioritization. I think a lot of us think of hiring as this like sub function. Most of us don't hire talent teams or recruiting teams or people teams until a little bit later. Whereas at the end of the day, our businesses are our people. That's the differentiator. So that's something I think a lot about is how do we actually think about prioritization for a thing that might take 4 weeks and it might take 4 months.
Yeah, you don't really know how it's going to evolve, but I do just love you emphasizing the fit piece, both for the company, but also for the person. Like, what are their goals? What do they actually like doing? And something that I've seen happen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is founders look at who has the best title, who's been at the biggest company that I know the name of. And those people oftentimes, in my experience, are not the best in early stage startups because of all the ambiguity, and maybe you need someone with actually less experience. So I'm curious how all of that plays out from your perspective.
So glad you brought that up. I think it's this I see this all the time. We want recognizable logos. But then if I think it through logically as someone who's not feeling the pain, who doesn't have the like gutness of the business, I'm thinking, wait, I don't want someone at Airtable because they're so siloed at this point, they're not going to understand that you're actually working across it. Or, I don't want an account executive who's like, oh, well, I'll send that to marketing and they'll fix it. I'm like, there is no marketing team. You're the marketing team, right? But I think the reason I'm so glad you asked that question, Evelyn, is we need to get into the why. Why does someone feel more comfortable with someone who has the right title in the logo? And the biggest piece there is fear. We're so scared to make the wrong hires. There's so much pressure and so much at stake on making these hires. And there's also so much upside if we do it right. These are truly make or break decisions in the business. And we can de-risk if we're like, oh, the people at Notion, at Airtable, at Ramp, they're doing it right. We know they have a culture of excellence in people. If they bet on this person, I should feel pretty confident betting on them. That's one side of how I see that. Another is a little bit of pattern matching, or we see like, oh, that person rose really quick. Seems like they have a high slope. Means they're probably going to take on new tooling and learn how to wield it, as opposed to being overwhelmed by it. So there's definitely some of those are like the core pieces. I also find sometimes it's that we're making assumptions that are maybe true, maybe not true. I had a client once who, we found this candidate who went to Stanford, and we were hiring in Miami, and we really fixated on this person and loved her background. And I was kind of seeing myself be like, wait, the likelihood of us finding an early career person living in Miami from Stanford is not that high for this function. And thankfully I got to kind of dig down and say like, well, if someone went to Stanford and you see that, what does that show you as an early career professional? And, we really learned that, it means that, think of like Rory Gilmore in Gomorrah. Like she was so focused on going to Harvard and then Yale that was her only focus. And that's what we want. We want someone who this particular team really thrives. It's someone who can go after a goal and really make it their focus despite any obstacles over a long period of time, which is almost the textbook, or at least Angela Duckworth's definition of grit, right? So we realized, we need a gritty person. Ended up making a great hire of someone who'd been running their blog on the side, not making money on it, but was consistently every week showing up for 8 years making posts. That was the right person for them. And it didn't mean they had to go to Stanford. Stanford was one potential path of showcasing that grit, but not everyone who goes to Stanford has that grit. Many do, but it was one proxy, right? So that's something that I see sometimes we're making assumptions about something as a proxy and either over-indexing on that as a proxy or missing out on other things that equally could have gotten us that path. So we're making our path a little bit more narrow than it needs to be, is something that I see as well.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And grit, I feel like that is the right term for just early startup hires. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about grit this week because right now we're switching gears away from go to market, but like I think this ties in that working on a lot of founding engineer searches in New York City. Every person I talk to is like, yeah, I'm getting at least every other day, I'm getting some recruiter reaching out to me, sometimes more than one. And it just reminds me that this is a pretty crowded space in terms of that like really amazing, great, gritty, hungry, like high owner builder mentality, like startup talent. There's not an unlimited number of people here. So we are having to really woo folks. And that's where it's helpful. I mean, a product marketer who can help us understand, how am I building our talent brand, right? How am I even differentiating to a candidate of why this company versus that other one, I think can be really important too. But I find that this is also something that I see from when we're scared and we kind of approach the hiring process with fear, we're looking to kind of screen out people sometimes a little bit too much, as opposed to reminding ourselves that, we also have to help them get excited along the way. We can't wait until we're all in to help them get all in as well. That's something else I find, like we can't be so guarded that we're not like bringing folks along the way, because these top people that we're hiring, that founding marketer who's the right fit probably has options. And we need to make sure that we're building a hiring process that is designed for that person, not designed for the people who aren't going to be the right fit.
Yeah, you need to be all in if you're joining a startup, honestly in any role, but that is not like a chill job. And like people aren't expecting it to be. Like I'm never expecting it to be when I start working with new founders, but it is something where I also need to be sold on the vision and like the mission of the company and why should I care about you as a founder? Like why should I believe in you? So them selling me on the company is just as important as me selling them on why I'm the right fit.
Exactly. And if someone is so quick to be like, oh, I don't know anything about them, but yeah, I love them. Well, A, I'm having trouble like seeing the genuineness of that. And B, if they're excited by everything, are they really going to be all in on this thing? Or is the next fleeting thing really going to catch their interest? And that's where I want to kind of counsel the founders that we work with to make sure that like a little bit of curiosity and hesitation before they jump all in, it's actually a great signal that they're being really clear and strategic about deciding, is this the thing I go all in on? Because the person we want here is like, once they're in, they're in. And someone who's calculated about when they go in, I see as actually a really strong signal here.
Finding the right person from this conversation and also all the other conversations that we've had in the past is not something that you do quickly and without spending a lot of time on it and understanding the role that you're hiring for. So I think there is a huge reason for founders to work with recruiters like yourself that really specialize in these niches of like startup hiring specifically for go to market. That's like such a valuable thing. So if founders who are listening are considering hiring and potentially working with a partner recruiter, what should they be looking for?
Yeah, great question. To be honest, I started the recruiting space thinking ideally this function wouldn't be there. Ideally, the right person would just apply to the right job. And like this doesn't, and I've learned so much, especially in early stage work. So much of our work is not just finding the person, it's really being that thought partner to help scope the role right. If we scope the role right, we have a better step to doing that. But that takes a lot of back and forth and a lot of pushback and a lot of just like knowledge and help there. So you want someone who's made a similar hire before. So number one is like someone, if you're an early stage team, you've got to work with a recruiting partner who understands early stage teams. It is so different than filling the, 2000th account executive role at LinkedIn, right? Someone who really understands the pain and the pressure that you're under to make this hire. So number one, someone who understands it. I think number two is really pay attention to how they're going to represent you. I find that I hear a lot from folks like, oh, well, they just sent me some resumes. And that was it. So that means they're taking people already in their network, which is great, and kind of sending them over, but not really listening or hearing or asking questions. If you don't have a recruiter who is pushing you to spend more time with them, it's probably not a great signal. You should be working with a recruiter who is so curious about what you do because they're then going to have to be that first point of contact to candidates and wooing them, right? I mean, I spend my time as basically continuing my sales career, really just trying to get someone to take their most precious thing in the world, which is their time, out of a busy day to talk to me about a role they've never heard of before. That's what I spend my time day in and day out doing that. And if I don't really care about the company and the stories, and if I'm not asking for those pieces, those human sides, the ambition, the growth, like if I don't know those pieces, how would I convey that? So I think that's one other piece. And I think three is just someone who you feel like sees you, someone who gets you. So when you're giving, feedback, seeing that that's iterated on, I think is a pretty good thing. And you can do that before, committing and signing a contract with someone as well. Just asking for some sample profiles, not of people they've met with, but like, who would you bring to me? What does that background look like? Just show that you see me and that you hear me and understand me. And someone seen by, I might not have the right communication style for someone, but someone that you feel like you're actually going to be a partner with that sees you, I think is another really important piece here. We're in startups, so of course you have the intangibles. Of course they're going to be gritty. Of course they're going to be fast. Of course they're going to be really hungry. Of course they're going to feel like a builder and owner. Of course those are all going to be there too.
Yeah, those are a given if you're going to work with.
Yeah, that's the table stakes, exactly.
I have one final question on this topic, which is once people actually have that go-to-market hire, whether it's in sales, customer success, marketing, and they're kind of handing off this thing that usually the founder has been doing for a while to this expert that they hired, what do you feel like founders need to know to make those people successful?
Feedback. we can't intuit. And I would say that a big part of this job is extracting information from the founder's head. A lot of the things, like when you sit in a meeting that first week and that person shows up on your Zoom meeting or shows up in the office and participates in their first high level meeting, how do you want them to show up? I couldn't know that unless it has been a problem in the past and maybe you brought it up, right? So the more we can talk about what has been really successful on our teams and hires and what specifically tactically has not, lets us just kind of build this much bigger picture. So the more feedback, the better. There for sure, because so much of this is learning and iterative, and it's probably going to also change. But the more you can communicate, the better.
Communication is the key to everything.
Yeah, my best partners are the ones, like, I can tell we're going to make a good hire based on the investment that a team I work with puts into our conversations. I have a client right now who is hiring a New York City based engineer, and they're a great team. But they are, all of their leadership shows up to all of our conversations. And every time I give them a project to do to like help, they're on it immediately. Like, we're going to make a great hire because they're prioritizing making this hire because they recognize how game changing this hire is going to be for their business versus just seeing it as this like extra checkbox. And at the end of the day, if our businesses are the differentiators, our people, we actually need to spend a lot of time doing this thing. And I think it's also worth noting that we're building innovative startup companies to do a thing that has literally never been done before. So the functions within this business have also literally never been done before. And it's okay to sit in the fact that it is really hard. And that's where I find it's pretty invaluable to have a partner that's able to kind of guide you on that journey, who also understands the tactics of this niche thing, because it's a whole beast. But also, it's hard, but also so beautiful. And that magic, when you find that values aligned person who's like the perfect fit, hard to beat that adrenaline.
It's amazing. Early stage teams that just like are the perfect blend of people is like you can do anything. So I think that's such an amazing point to end on. And I'd love to just take it back to you for a second, which, I have some ideas on what your answer might be for this, but what is something that you're excited about both in your personal and in your professional life?
Yeah, personal life, doing a lot of like small local community work has been amazing. And continually I'm doing, volunteering at my daughter's school or taking up curling and being involved in the curling club. And it just reminds me how important the one-on-one connection is. And that is fueling a lot of the work I'm doing professionally. Just that reminder that when we get back to first principles at the end of the day, like connection is key. And that's all recruiting is. That's the connection that we can make to communicate. Like that stuff is so important. So, and then on the professional side, writing this book has been a pretty audacious goal. And I've been really enjoying it. I finally did all my note carding, which I think is the rite of passage for all authors. And it's feeling really great. And I'm really eager to put this in the hands of founders I talk to, because I think there's so many easy takeaways that we can learn here, both on the deep reflection as well as kind of on the tactical side.
I am so excited for your book. And I feel like it's going to be one of those things that I send to founders that I work with, read this.
That's my hope. That's exactly how I envision this book is great. You have a new founder or a new hiring person on your team who was great at that function and now they're hiring, quick upskill. Is how I'm envisioning this. So, got some goals this year around how we get that draft edited. So, thank you.
So cool. And also the note cards. I'm a big fan. I've not had note cards in many years, but you're inspiring me to grab some of those and some sticky notes and just get back to basics, It
just, we come at problems different ways. And I think that's the grit, right? Is that we know we have to keep solving this problem. So we're going to keep coming at it in a bunch of different ways, and then we'll get there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nikki. Last question. If you're a founder listening who wants help hiring your go-to-market team, or you're a go-to-market leader who's, potentially looking for their next role, or you're just interested in your book and following all the cool things that you're doing, where can people find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. So it's Nikki Adamson. We'll put the links in. I'm sure, Evelyn, you'll do all that magic. And then I work at Hire People. And it's hire, lift them hire. And it's hirepeople.co. Katie and I are always ready to talk to new founders. And really just we have such a deep passion for the startup space and for doing this work. And we're kind of doing it ourselves on our end as we grow our team internally. We're always eager to just chat with folks and share the knowledge that we can.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. I love this conversation, and I'm sure everyone listening will too. So
Thank
seriously
you,
appreciate your
Evelyn.
time.
This has been lovely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for listening to Growing Startups. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to give us a rating so more people can find the show. So happy you're here, and see you in the next one.